So I am going to read Wait by Roy Kesey from the Kenyon Review. This was collected in the 2007 Best American Short Stories, edited by Stephen King, which is a gift to my mother, who I'm reading to. Hi, Mom. Hi, Mom. Page 194. This is one of my very favorite short stories. Wait by Roy Kesey. Waiting Lounge 19A in Wing D of Terminal 4 is precisely full. The airline personnel smile. The loudspeaker voice says that the flight will begin boarding shortly. The announcement is in English. The woman's accent a mix of Portuguese, Dutch, and Malay. A Canadian accountant snaps his briefcase shut and stares out at the fog that is settling on the tarmac. The fog is dense and gray and certain. He glances at the passengers seated to either side of him, an old Bulgarian man working a crossword puzzle, an older Honduran woman fast asleep. Then, at the statue in the center of the lounge, a naked boy holding a cell phone and some sort of globular tropical fruit. The plane is now invisible, but the smiles of the airline personnel do not wane. The accountant wonders if his futures market holdings back home are headed for contango or backwardation. He shivers, walks from his seat to the windows, presses his fingertips to the pane. The pilot and crew stride into the lounge, consult with the airline personnel, stride back out. The scheduled boarding time comes and goes. The loudspeaker voice announces that the fog will be lifting momentarily. The accountant returns to his seat, removes a pad of paper from his briefcase, commences doodling. Children take out coloring books. Other passengers unfold newspapers and magazines. Airline personnel daydream of islands and speak urgently into handheld radios, though this is only for show. The batteries have been on back order for years. Aircraft scheduled to land circle invisibly overhead. The fog flares against the glass. The Bulgarian clutches at his forehead, and the accountant asks if he needs medical assistance. No, thank you. You're sure? Do I look as though I need it? A little. Yes, I am attempting to think of something for which the flaring of this fog might be metonymically appropriate. The Canadian squints. I'm a poet, says the Bulgarian. Ah, yes. The Bulgarian also squints, then shrugs and returns to his crossword. The televisions buzz and mumble. News about a war that is beginning or ending in a country nearby. Not the neighboring country to the west, but the next one over. All but one of the children close their coloring books and take out their jacks. A small Mongolian boy takes out his checkerboard instead and worries that this will make him unlikable. The accountant pulls a scarf from his carry-on, winds it around his neck. Across the lounge sits a girl from Ghana, and she is unthinkably beautiful. He stares at her until he realizes that she is staring back. He looks down, pretends to find a doodle that needs improving, and the girl from Ghana smiles. The loudspeaker voice announces that there will be a brief delay as the plane's instruments are recalibrated. The Mongolian boy plays himself to a draw. The airline personnel hand out dense cassava crackers and bright purple tea, assure everyone that it will be only a few minutes more, and the air thickens with discontent. The fog shifts to the left and back to the right. The televisions brim and burble about soccer. The poet asks the accountant if he knows the name of the Norse goddess who keeps the apples of eternal youth in a box. The accountant apologizes for not knowing. The poet asks if he knows the capital of Bahrain. Again, the accountant says that he is sorry. The poet asks if he knows the smell of kifte as it fries on the stove. The accountant asks how a smell could be a crossword clue, and the poet says it has nothing to do with the puzzle. He hasn't been back to Bulgaria in 40 years, and the smell of kifte is his favorite childhood memory. The accountant nods and shakes his head. The poet throws the newspaper in a garbage can and goes to sleep. The accountant turns to the old Honduran woman, now awake, She gums a smile at him. He stares out the window again. The Mongolian boy plays himself to another draw as the other children put away their jacks and take out their comic books. The aircraft circling invisibly overhead are sent to alternate airports. The airline personnel report that the boarding of the flight will be delayed for another hour to allow the fog to lift. The bookstore manager laments not having raised his prices this morning. Passengers now crowd the gate. Urgencies are explained. Pregnant wife, dying father, sick cat, ex-husband in pursuit. And the airline personnel communicate their understanding and deep regret. There is shrieking with spittle in regard to eggplant rotting on a dock in Stockholm, and the poet wakes, scratches his face, shouts, "Iduna!" The accountant leans slightly away. The poet roots to the garbage can, pulls out the crossword puzzle, fills in the word. A bar that is run short of ice negotiates with another that is run short of napkins. The televisions shudder and flash. There has been a chemical spill of some sort just outside the airport. The driver missed his exit because of the fog, says the reporter. A taxi skidded and a bus swerved. The truck jackknifed. And for the moment, no one is allowed in or out the main entrance. Groups form. Impatient passengers versus patient passengers. The accountant and the poet are neither patient nor impatient and pretend to read as the yelling begins. The loudspeaker voice says that anyone wishing to leave the airport will be escorted out the cargo bay entrance located in Terminal F. The other passengers discuss options. The fog flexes. The old Honduran woman gums a smile to no one in particular. The accountant asks the poet if he knows why some of the terminals have numbers and some have letters. "Manama," says the poet. "I beg your pardon?" "Manama, 6 letters, begins with an M. Yes, it can only be Manama." The girl from Ghana stretches, and the air around her hums. Night closes in, and the airline personnel report that they are unfortunately unable to offer proper lodging for the evening, as all the hotels in the city are full. None of the passengers believe this. More shouting ensues and an exodus, all of the locals and a number of hopeful non-locals. A cafe runs short of creamer. A restaurant runs short of cheese. The airline personnel announce that each passenger still present will receive free cassava crackers and purple tea for the remainder of his or her stay in the airport. The children are very pleased. The poet asked the airline personnel if all traces of cyanide were removed from the cassava roots before they were ground into flour, is assured that, in fact, they were. Pillows and blankets are brought from the invisible plane on the tarmac. Children stretch out on the floor. Parents drape themselves with coats. The girl from Ghana stares at the fog, wondering how many days it will take her ex-husband to track her from Barakum. Bars run short of bitters, and the cleaning staff cleans, threading themselves between sleepers and sacks in silence. The poet elbows the accountant, points to the checkerboard protruding from the Mongolian boy's carry-on. 4 hours later, with the score 9-7 in favor of the accountant, the old Honduran woman asks if she might play as well. She wins the next 12 matches, falls asleep mid-move at dawn. The accountant slides the board back into the child's bag. Other passengers stir and scratch. The members of last night's exodus come traipsing back, the locals smiling, satisfied at having chosen wisely. The non-locals exhausted, mumbling anecdotes of numberless cab rides and the infinite walk back from the cargo bay entrance. Children whine. Airline personnel bring thin coffee and bad rolls, promise that today is the day, that it is only a question of minutes. The fog appears still denser, still grayer, still more certain. The televisions say that the chemical spill is nearly cleaned up and vehicular traffic will soon be permitted on the access road once again. And the passengers wait. All the bars have run short of cognac and celery sticks. The accountant follows the girl from Ghana into duty-free, observes her, observing ceremonial daggers, buys a keychain bearing an animal that looks part monkey, part ferret, part partridge, a favorite local pet. The loudspeaker whistles briefly. The televisions flip and flap, a cholera epidemic spreading toward the city, and the airline personnel assure everyone that their best bet now is staying put. Groups are reconfigured, locals versus foreigners. There are hygiene-based accusations, a few punches thrown, but none landed. The children ignore this, chase one another through the wing, and one kicks at a carry-on. Both the child and the carry-on belong to locals, but from different parts of the city, and now the group split into subgroups. The foreigners based on nationality, the locals based on neighborhood and therefore class. Each subgroup retreats into itself, then expands slightly, seeking more terrain. Neither the Canadian nor the Bulgarian fit into any subgroup, and they keep their eyes down, their elbows firmly on their armrests. More shrieking occurs, and some kickboxing, and a small amount of taekwondo. It is the Belgians who have the first idea for a way to diminish the tension and pass the time. A congress, followed by a pageant. Eyes are rolled, but all subsequent ideas are worse. Delegates are nominated, gather in the bookstore and hammer out agreements. Square yardage assigned per capita, dotted borders drawn in masking tape, magazines are shoplifted, and the bookstore manager flutters. The pageant. Middle-class locals drag the statue to one side, and each subgroup pools its makeup and clothes and advice. The women dress in the restrooms, fight for mirror space, angles, and light. Improvised sashes, Swiss judges, and Italian MC. The vast gifts of the girl from Ghana deafen the crowd, swing each decision, and even so, the Venezuelans protest. Lunch is worrisome. Restaurant prices have trebled, and there is no ham to be found. Afterwards, children remove toys from bags. The boys have plastic soldiers, the girls have Barbie dolls, and they all play together at war. The dolls wear stiletto heels, are 10 times the size of the soldiers, leave death and destruction in their wakes. There is a new phenomenon, light, seeming to sift through the fog that now appears thinner, striped, not entirely sure. The loudspeaker voice announces that the flight will be departing momentarily. The pilot and crew stride again into the lounge. They nod and wave, and applause floods the air. Magazines are stowed and carry-ons are hefted. Hands are shaken and a line forms. The line lengthens, and yet there is no cutting in. The line arcs and straightens. The boarding gate doors opened, then closed. An upper-middle-class local child points out the window. The fog has thickened, darkened, grown more assured. The pilot and crew stride again out of the lounge, and they do not nod, and they do not wave. The loudspeaker voice announces that the flight will be delayed momentarily. The subgroups sulk back to their territories. Children poke each other and cry. An hour passes this way, and another hour, and another. The bookstore manager aligns his paperbacks. The fog surges, stalls, surges. The Mongolian boy comes to the accountant, asks what is in his briefcase. Says that he hopes to be an accountant when he grows up, or else a matador. And then his mother calls, and he runs away. The old woman from Honduras champs and sighs and dreams of a pageant she once won, a pageant that never occurred, but it was wonderful, wonderful. She waved to the throng, thanked her father for his unwavering support, and the poet turns to the accountant. Would you happen to know? No. I was only wondering. It doesn't matter. The answer is no. The Bulgarian shrugs. Afghanistan's longest river goes unnamed, and there is an explosion not far away. Children fall and parents stumble. The lounge windows crack, ceiling tiles pinwheel through the air, and dust pours into the wing. The lights go out and the televisions fall dark. There is shouting and screaming and hands clawing at necks and eyes. Then there is the hum and grind of generators, and the electricity returns, and the passengers go still. The loudspeaker voice requests that all available security guards and cleaning staff report immediately to their respective central workstations. Airline personnel run in medium-sized circles. The passengers gather around the televisions that clatter and spark. They wait, and at last the answer comes. A small meteor has hit the main lobby. It is not easy to believe, but the images are undeniable. Delegates meet at the boarding gate and reach no conclusions. Children kick one another. Restaurants run short of lettuce. And now, the airline personnel assure the passengers that there is no reason to panic, that while the number of dead and wounded is not yet known, there is no structural damage to Wing D, and the plane and runway and control tower are wholly intact, and it is therefore only a question of the fog lifting, and then the flight will be on its way. Passengers wander out to see the meteor and the damage, are met by armed guards, and partitioning wander back. The Honduran woman finds a large fuchsia bug crawling up her pant leg. It has 9 eyes and 22 legs, reminds her of her mother's flower garden, and she squashes it with her fist. Bars run short of swizzle sticks, and then, improbably, gin. The fog skirls. Toilets clog and garbage cans overflow. Darkness drops, the generators growl and fail, and the airline personnel regret that no additional blankets are available. The subgroups gather into themselves. The girl from Ghana dreams the roar of 1,000 Fonton-From drums, while across the lounge the accountant fights through a nightmare involving misconstrued negative amortization schedules. In the morning there is still no electricity, and the subgroups curse and pace. There are accusations of theft, missing magazines, missing mints. The fog slackens, then stiffens, and at the masking tape borders there are dark suggestions, darker looks. The local delegates gather in a sloppy oval, announce that they have had enough, that they are going home, that they will break down the door if necessary, will walk across the tarmac and scale any fence and be free. The airline personnel insist that the flight will be departing at any moment. The locals gather their things. The airline personnel take a stand at the boarding gate. The locals push them aside, then hesitate. Lined outside the door are a dozen armed soldiers standing shadowed in gray in the fog. The locals look at the airline personnel. The airline personnel shrug and say that they have no idea either. The locals set down their things, gather again. The soldiers grimace and strut. The airline personnel wave the unit captain up to the glass, and words are passed, and the words are diffuse. Something about a quarantine, but its cause is unclear. The word virus is heard, but what came before? AIDS? Space? The locals froth. An hour passes angrily. The fog lifts 8 inches and drops back down. The Bulgarian rereads an old poem in his notebook, contemplates adding an adverb, and the Belgians have another idea. An Olympiad. Enough already, say the Dutch, and yet no better idea is brought forward. Judges are appointed, and passengers who belong to no subgroup are assigned to one now created. Other. A program is drawn up on stationery, bought by the Saudis. The Americans want baseball, the Russians want volleyball, the Chinese want table tennis, and all are disappointed. The upper lower middle class locals suggest that children ride their parents for the equestrian events. Synchronized swimming is exchanged for synchronized walking. Water polo becomes carpet polo, and archery is replaced with throw the ball of paper into the garbage can from increasingly great distances. Winter events are ignored until the Norwegians threaten to boycott. Then babies in strollers are called bobsledders, and curling is given pride of place in time. Hog lines are drawn in chalk, brooms are taken from closets, wheeled carry-on bags replace rocks, and the Scottish skip's hammer is a double take-out draw for the gold. Next comes fencing, a question of umbrellas. Then rowing occurs with baggage carts and mops, and the Australian coxless 4 is untouchable. Dressage is won by Chilean toddler when the Mongolian boy's father hashes a last-minute piaffe. Kenyans, of course, sweep the marathon. Hours of quick circling. Cubans, of course, sweep the boxing. A Turk and a Greek meet in judo, half middleweight the only division. The Greek has mastered the body drop, the naked strangle, and the inner thigh. But the Turk has mastered the sweeping hip, the scarf hold, and both the major inner and major outer reaps, thereby carrying the day and declaring the Cyprus question settled. The Latvians are accused of doping, the Nigerians of bribery. A tenor from Suriname sings so that rhythmic gymnastics might flourish. Again, there is a small amount of taekwondo, the upper class locals upsetting the Koreans to everyone's moderate surprise. The members of Other are the Canadian, the Bulgarian, 5 stout young women who are not willing to say where they are from, an Orthodox priest from Ukraine, and a lawyer from Pakistan. They consistently come in fourth. The Canadian apologizes for his failure to hurdle more deftly, and his teammates tell him not to worry, as long as he did his best, which they are sure he did. The girl from Ghana blows him a kiss from the long jump pit, and the fog brindles and shies. The competition lasts until nightfall the following day. The medal ceremony is light-hearted yet dignified, and the medals donated by duty-free or foil-wrapped chocolate coins that gleam in the low gray light. The members of Other admire their participant ribbons. The airline personnel announce that 19A is surely the greatest intact lounge in the entire airport. Free purple tea for everyone. But in the morning, post-Olympic malaise. The 5 women announce that they will no longer be known as Other, that such marginalization will not be tolerated in this day, in this age. No one is listening. The restaurants and bars and cafes have run short of most things. What were meant to be in-flight meals are defrosted in the plane on the tarmac, brought and handed out. Spouses bitch to and at one another. Parents smack children, generally their own, but not always. The Honduran woman snorts. Still there is no electricity. Still the fog hangs. The accountant gets up, walks past the girl from Ghana, stands looking out the window. The girl from Ghana smiles. The accountant sees the smile reflected in the cracked glass, turns, attempts conversation. They discuss the man from New Guinea and the woman from Guinea-Bissau, unknown to each other until this wait, and the Ukrainian priest who now weds them. They discuss the man from Madrid and the woman from Warsaw, 8 years of marriage, of bickering and contempt, and the Pakistani lawyer who draws up the papers for the divorce. They discuss the soldiers and the statue, the meteor and the fog. They do not, however, discuss their respective ex-spouses. Warlord currently closing in. Librarian currently dating a podiatrist. A young Bolivian woman gives birth in the bookstore, the manager himself delivering. While in a restroom, an old Kazakh man is bitten by a tiny blue snake. A species of viper, says one local. A species of adder, says another. The viper, or adder, escapes through a crack in the tile. The Kazakh man dies and is buried in a planter. Then night swells. The priest agrees to swap seats with the accountant in exchange for a fountain pen. The accountant puts his arm around the girl, feels the thick, chaotic scars on her far shoulder. Wonders. They slump together, sleep, snore not quite silently. The next morning, again, there are things to discuss. Cubans, for example. The Cubans are up to something. They have been gathered since well before dawn, whispering, and now are approaching each of the other subgroups and whispering again. Finally, one comes to where the accountant and the girl from Ghana sit. "It is time," whispers their Cuban, a thin boy, perhaps 9 years old. "Time for what?" says the accountant. "Time to go." "Go where?" "To the plane." "What for?" "My uncle is a trained pilot. My cousin is a trained stewardess. We will fly the plane ourselves." "But how do we know if the plane even has fuel? And what if mechanical difficulties occur? Have you considered the possibility of in-flight mechanical difficulties?" "All possibilities have been considered. My aunt is a trained aircraft technician. My brother is a trained philosopher, but has worked at a gas station." "What about the quarantine?" "It does not interest us." "And the soldiers?" "We do not think they will try to stop us once they see our determination." "But if they do?" "That would be unfortunate. Very, very unfortunate. It is the price that must be paid, however. You do not have to join us. We are not asking you to join us. You are welcome to join us if you wish, but you are also free not to join us, if that is your desire." The girl from Ghana stands. The accountant catches her arm, shakes his head. She sits back down, watches as the Cubans are joined by a number of other passengers, all of them childless, all of them medalists, a ululating rhombus of discontent. The locals, too, have formed a rhombus, a separate and smaller rhombus. It appears that they intend to take advantage of the Cuban commotion to escape across the tarmac and climb any fence as planned. The soldiers' expressions are not clearly visible in the fog. The larger rhombus slides toward the boarding gate door. The airline personnel attempt dissuasion, promising limitless purple tea and also mauve tea and even the rarer chartreuse tea, if the Cubans and childless medalists will just have a little patience. The larger rhombus shouts and charges. The smaller rhombus slips in behind. The boarding gate door is broken down. Shouts and flashes fill the fog, and it can only be imagined. Some soldiers beaten to the ground, others crouched and firing. The running and falling, the gurgle of death, the scrambling and standing and running once again. Another sound now, the sound of jet engines, and some of them have made it. A few Cubans, a few childless medalists must have made it. The accountant and the girl from Ghana hug each other and cry, ashamed of their cowardice, though thrilled for those who have triumphed. The scream of the engines dissipates, and surely the plane is trundling out to the runway. The scream returns, louder and louder, and the plane must now be going airborne. And then an explosion as loud as that of the meteor, and the brightest of muffled flashes, and the light of that flash is the moment when all can just be seen. The plane has hit the control tower. The accountant and the girl from Ghana hug each other again and cry again, no longer thrilled or ashamed. They hold each other through the numb silence and the shrieks and the wailing, and the Mongolian boy stares from where he hides beneath his seat. All eyes close for a time. When they open again, airline personnel are repairing the door, and soldiers are once more visible out the windows, though fewer of them and in some disarray. The remaining subgroups return to their territories, extend their boundaries, claim 2 seats per passenger. There is no food or drink to be had in any bar, cafe, or restaurant. The remaining diligents gather, discuss, and ransack duty-free. The spoils are distributed equitably. Chocolate and champagne and cigarettes for all. Again, the fog flares. The poet takes out his notebook, scribbles at length, hides the scribbling with his hand when the Honduran woman leans close, and now the airline personnel announce that they have good news. The Cubans and childless medalists took the wrong plane, and the remaining passengers' flight will be departing momentarily, just as soon as the fog lifts and the electricity is restored, and the quarantine is ended, and the control tower is rebuilt. All of the women in the lounge begin Sorry, just tickles me. It just keeps building. It's so vital. All of the women in the lounge begin menstruating simultaneously. A tampon is worth a bottle of champagne, then 2 bottles, then a case. The men of each subgroup huddle, discuss suicide. The cold has gone treacherous, and as darkness at last descends, all extra seats are destroyed for fuel. The bookstore is dismembered for kindling, the manager at first resisting, then remembering his insurance and standing aside. Each fire is tended gently, but in the morning there are new claims of theft. Missing Marlboros, missing Kents. The delegates meet desperately. The Belgian suggests a spelling bee and is beaten senseless. The girl from Ghana tells the Canadian that things will soon go bad, that she has been in similar situations, and always things go bad. She asks if he has any skills that might be useful. I'm a whiz at analyzing debenture impact on leverage. Anything else? I've been known to make adequate preparations for balloon maturity. Just then, on the far side of the wing, the Greek defeats the Turk at tic-tac-toe, announces that the Cyprus question has been reopened. The Turk pushes the Greek pushes the Turk. Sides are drawn up, only 2 of them now. There is punching and kickboxing and taekwondo. There is pinching and biting and scratching. The soldiers kick down the boarding gate door, are attacked by passengers bearing burning armrests and broken bottles of Moet et Chandon. The girl from Ghana drags the accountant into a corner and lays herself across him. There is automatic weapons fire and the jolt of grenades, shouting and screams, and then silence. The girl from Ghana lifts her head She asks the accountant if he's all right, and he says that he thinks he is. Together they stand. There is a gash in the girl's right forearm, and the accountant binds it with his scarf. Nothing else moves but dust. They walk through the lounge, and the statue of the boy with his cell phone and globular fruit is perfectly intact against the far wall, but all else is shattered glass, strangled soldiers, torn carpet, impaled passengers, broken brooms, disemboweled airline personnel. The accountant stumbles.
This is your favorite story?
It's hilarious. They walk to the location. Where was I? The accountant stumbles over the Honduran woman, her neck bent obliquely. He closes her eyes and mouth, hears a slight moan to his left, and finds the poet bleeding from the chest, his bare feet turned black, tendrils of smoke extending from each toe. "That is it," says the poet. "What is what?" "The smell of kifta as it fries on the stove." "But there is no kifta here." "There is. There must be. It can only be kifta." The accountant takes the poet in his arms, shakes his head. But then he knows it is the smell of the poet's own charred flesh. He tells the Bulgarian that he is right, that it is kifta, the finest kifta ever fried, and the waiter will be arriving at any moment to serve them. The Bulgarian nods and dies. The accountant lays him down. There is light and sputtering from many directions. The electricity has returned. The televisions declare that the national cricket team has finally gotten its new uniforms. The girl from Ghana finds another survivor, the Mongolian boy, and she brushes the glass from his hair and picks him up. The loudspeaker voice clears its throat, announces that the departure of their flight will be delayed momentarily. There is a thump, and another, and the Mongolian boy points. The accountant and the girl from Ghana look. Something large and brown is smacking against the window frame. They step to the boarding gate door. Before them is a massive rattan basket, hanging half a foot off the ground. Loose tethers writhe to either side. The balloon itself can barely be seen, a vast, round, dense yellow presence above them, and the basket slumps and settles as they watch. "You told me that you were an expert with balloons," says the girl from Ghana. Not balloons, balloon maturity. Balloons are balloons. It is not a difficult thing." "Right, but Owuraku." "Well, be that as it may, my ex-husband." The accountant follows her eyes. Working toward them is a very tall, very black, heavily armed man whose expression oscillates between rage and despair. He searches from body to statue to bookstore. He glances at the boarding gate door. Now the girl from Ghana climbs into the basket, sets the Mongolian boy down, flips switches at random. The pilot light ignites. The girl from Ghana reads labeling, fires the burner, looks at the accountant. From deep in the fog comes a voice shouting about the difference between hands-on and light hands-on. The warlord is now pacing toward the door. The accountant climbs in and the Mongolian boy comes to stand beside him. The girl from Ghana tosses ballast. The basket begins to lift. The accountant tells the boy that there is nothing to be afraid of, taps at the gauges for the pyrometer, the altimeter, and the variometer, wonders what they signify, and hopes that they are not important. The warlord appears at the door. The accountant reels in the tethers. The warlord screams and falls and begs. The air smells of kifta. The basket rises into the cold, wet gray, and the warlord weeps, aims, fires, misses, beautifully. That was Wait by Roy Kesey from the Kenyon Review, selected by Stephen King in 2007, and read to you by Michael Clark, with interspersed fits of laughter and commentary by Leanne Clark. I love that poem. Okay, all right, coming.